There's 6 areas that you want to think about changing in your internal organizational model as you move to all virtual teams, internal virtual teams. Motivation, engagement, effective communication, resolving conflicts, cultivating trust, cybersecurity, and accountability. Motivation engagement, what's that about? Well, you might have heard from a lot of surveys, a lot of studies, that we have a crisis of engagement and motivation here in the United States. Now, how many employees are actually engaged, motivated? How many are fully engaged and problem solving and creative and passionate about their employer? 34% on average. Of course, more nonprofits than for-profits, but still much less than half, unfortunately, on an average nonprofit. So this is a serious issue where most people, half of the people, perhaps in nonprofits, are just going there to punch the clock, to just do their job, and they will leave pretty quickly if they see a better offer. And that's not great. But it will be even more difficult in the COVID-19 coronavirus situation of working from home. In the initial month or so, people are still in emergency mode. They're still rushing. There's that adrenaline rush. But people can't function in emergency mode that long. They burn out. So they will quickly switch over to functioning in regular mode at home in their virtual setting and through virtual collaboration. What does that mean? Well, there's going to be a lack of motivation from being around other employees. People get motivation from being around others. This is part of the tribalism in that Savannah environment that I mentioned. So we get very strong motivation from being around others doing the same task. And you need to figure out and help your employees replace that motivation when they're alone working virtually. There's also a stress of adjusting to their household during the pandemic. Maybe they have older children who moved back with them after the university closed, or of course younger children who are staying at home all the time now that school's closed and that summer camps are not opening up. So they have kids crawling all over them. Maybe they're spending 24/7 with their romantic partners, and it's straining them and getting on their nerves. Taking care of older adults who are especially vulnerable to COVID-19 and taking extra precautions not to get them sick. So there's a lot of stress that they're going under. So you need to provide support and guidance to your employees on how to work effectively from home and address motivation engagement. Effective communication is another area that's a big blow in virtual communication. When we go virtual, we change over to much more to text. So it's much more difficult to communicate effectively than in person. Because in text, you switch over to Microsoft Teams, Slack, Asana, Trello, all of these other communication and collaboration tools. They don't work nearly as effectively for conveying body language, tone. It's very different when I say, I think Michael should take this project. When I say, I think Michael should take this project, or I think Michael should take this project. These 3 phrases mean very different things, but when they're written, they're all the same. So a lot of mistakes and miscommunication will happen. And this is something you need to address and avoid. It's essential to train employees on how to communicate effectively in virtual teams in a whole variety of settings. So that's one. That's another area. Now, resolving conflicts. Conflicts, in face-to-face interactions, it's much easier to resolve conflicts. You're humanized, you're standing there, I can see you, I can see when there's anxiety or concern on your face about something I'm saying. I can drop by your office and nip conflicts in the bud. It will happen much less in these nipping problems in the bud, addressing them in virtual settings. So this is something that you really need to address because when I've helped teams transition to virtual settings before COVID-19, I've done that a number of times, there's been a lot more conflicts that people didn't realize that they would happen. So you need to understand that it's much easier for problems to go unnoticed and much harder to solve them effectively in virtual teams. So it's critical to give your employees training on this topic. Now, so those 2 are issues of training. Let's talk about another one, cultivating trust. You might not have thought about this, but in office interactions, there's a natural way of cultivating trust where you just chat with people, hang out over the water cooler or in the break room, eating donuts that your kind donors sent over. So you chat about your life, your kids, what's going on, your vacation plans, local sports ball team, and something like that. It's not happening in virtual settings. That's not what people do. That's not what happens. So in virtual settings, that humanizing element, that connection, that cultivation of relationships gets lost. And you need to figure out a way of replacing it. This is not a matter of training. This is a matter of creating institutions. And there's a number of institutions that can be created, policy settings that I can talk about in the Q&A. Next, cybersecurity. The FBI has shown that much more hacking is going on right now. First of all, because many more people are working from home, and these are less secure environments. So less secure environments, hackers know this, they're doing much more hacking, unfortunately. And the people who are at home, they're not used to following cybersecurity protocols. So not only are the computers, the programs, less safe, they have less protection, but they're not following the protocols that they're used to. So this is a matter of training. You need to improve it by providing training and, of course, funding for them to improve their home setup. Cybersecurity. And finally, accountability. Now, in the office environment, there are natural ways to hold each other accountable. So if you're the supervisor, you can walk around, check out what people are doing, make sure they're staying on track, make sure if they're looking confused or lost that you can help them out. And peers can pop in and say, hey, Mary, where's that report you were going to get me yesterday? And so when they pop into your cubicle, it's pretty hard to ignore them. But if they send an email, it's much easier to ignore them. So new structures must be created to enable accountability, both this chain of command, up-down accountability, and peer-to-peer accountability.